Before we begin the talk, let's cultivate our motivation and try and have the same kind of motivation as the Buddha has, the same kind of motivation that Vimalakirti has. And that's a motivation that cherishes others more than self and wants to improve ourselves, liberate ourselves from afflictions and other obscurations, and attain full awakening with wisdom, compassion, and power, so that we can be of the greatest benefit to each and every living being. So even though that's a very vast and profound motivation, and it's going to take us several lifetimes to actualize it, still it's very precious just to be able to generate it in our mind for a moment and think that we will follow the path of the Buddhas of the past, present, and future, and follow the path together with the Bodhisattvas. So generate that motivation for being here tonight, and let's make that our motivation for sharing the Dharma together. Okay. So, the Vimalakirti Sutra is one of the favorite Mahayana sutras in China. It's also found in the Tibetan canon, where it is often studied and referred to. And it's a very interesting sutra because it's a literary work as well as being a work explaining the Dharma, because it has a plot, it has characters, there's tension between the characters, there's a resolution at the end. So it's, how would you call it? A Buddhist thriller. Okay. So it begins, chapter 1, is the Buddha is sitting in a garden together with a big assembly of monastics, and he is teaching the Dharma to them. Yeah. And then so that's setting the stage for the Buddha in the garden with the monastics. Then chapter 2 sets the stage for Vimalakirti, who is a lay practitioner. He's a householder with a family, and he is manifesting illness in order to draw people in to him so he can teach them the Dharma, especially about the impurity of the world and compared to the Pure Lands and the disadvantages of having a flesh and blood body like we have instead of like the bodies in the Pure Lands. Okay, so we have two separate scenes, the Buddha in the garden with the monastics, Vimalakirti in his house, manifesting sickness to draw in the lay people so he can teach them the Dharma. Okay. Then, and this takes place in Vaisali, an ancient Indian city. Okay, then the third and fourth chapter, actually, Buddha is trying to encourage some of his disciples to go and inquire about Vimalakirti's health. Yeah, so the monastic disciples that the Buddha has, look here, everybody, front of the room, pay attention here. So there are here Shravaka disciples with the Buddha. There are solitary realizer disciples and also bodhisattva disciples. Okay, so the Buddha is trying to encourage some of his disciples to please go and inquire about Vimalakirti's health. And so first he asked some of his Shravaka disciples to go. Shariputra, Moggallana, Subhuti, and so on. And they all kind of say, well, yeah, but the last time we talked to Vimalakirti, what he said totally blew us away, and we're a little bit intimidated by him because he's very wise and his teachings are very much to the point. So they didn't want to go because they were afraid they might look a little foolish. So then the Buddha, in chapter 4 of the work, he asked his bodhisattva disciples to please go and inquire about Vimalakirti's health. And the bodhisattvas had the same reaction. And they were saying, but Vimalakirti is a bit too wise for us to handle. We feel very small in front of him. So this is where we left off last year. Okay, so I'm going to read you some of the things that happened and some of what the Bodhisattvas said. We talked about what the Shravakas said last year. So this year we'll talk about what the Bodhisattvas said. So the Buddha asked the Bodhisattva Maitreya, to please go to Vimalakirti and inquire about his health. And Maitreya replied, Lord, I am indeed reluctant to go to that good man to inquire about his illness. Why? Lord, I remember that one day I was engaged in a conversation with the gods of the Tushita heaven, and the god Samtushita and his retinue about the stage of non-regression of the great bodhisattvas. And at that time, the Lichavi Vimalakirti came there and addressed me as follows. So Vimalakirti said, Maitreya, the Buddha has prophesied that only one more birth stands between you and unexcelled perfect enlightenment. What kind of birth does this prophecy concern, Maitreya? Is it past? Is it future? Or is it present? Okay. If it is a past birth, it is already finished. If it is a future birth, it will never arrive. If it is a present birth, it does not abide. For the Buddha has declared, bhikshus, in a single moment, you are born, you age, you die, you transmigrate, and you are reborn. Okay, so that's what Vimalakirti said to Maitreya at another time. And do you know the answer to what Vimalakirti was saying? Because my Bodhisattva Maitreya had the prophecy that he will become a Buddha in one more lifetime. So Vimalakirti is saying, is that one lifetime in the past? Is it in the present? Or is it in the future? And here, he's not just talking about one conventional lifetime. If we are seeing the lifetimes as having some kind of essence, some kind of self in them, some kind of inherent existence. So if you think about it, this is actually asking us, because we always talk about stay in the present moment, right? So it's actually asking us, when is the precious present moment? Because here, at least in terms of rebirth, the past rebirth is over and finished, okay? So that's not going to be the one more rebirth that Maitreya needs. The future rebirth that Maitreya is going to have is not something that is solid and concrete and having a self. It's not something that's inherently existent. So he's not going to get enlightened in that future rebirth. What about the present rebirth? Well, when is the present rebirth? When is the present moment? We all say, be in the present moment. When is the present moment? We say, now. But as soon as we say that, that's the past moment, isn't it? Or even we just think, okay, each split second that's happening, that's the present moment. But every moment has three parts. It has a beginning, it has a middle, and it has the last part. So which of those three parts of that moment is the present moment? Yeah. Beginning's over, present we can't find. Last part of that moment hasn't happened yet. Okay. So as much as we divide every small moment trying to find the present moment, we can't identify it. And even if we think we got it, in the next moment, it's gone. It's over. Okay. So no wonder the Bodhisattva Maitreya was a little bit confused, because Vimalakirti was saying, where's the present moment? Where's the present lifetime? And Maitreya didn't know what to say. So he was reluctant to go to Vimalakirti's house and ask him how he was. Okay. Then the Buddha asked a few more disciples, and then he asked another bodhisattva called Jagatimdara to please go and inquire about Vimalakirti's health. And Jagatimdara said, "My Lord, I am indeed reluctant to go to that good man to inquire about his illness. Why, Lord? I remember that one day when I was at home, the wicked Mara, disguised as Indra," so we all know Mara, the troublemaker, the manifestation of our afflictions, and he was disguised as the god Indra, surrounded by 12,000 heavenly maidens. So Mara approached me with the sounds of music and singing. Having saluted me by touching my feet with his head, he withdrew with his retinue to one side. I then, thinking that he was Indra, the king of the gods, said to him, "Welcome. You should remain consciously aware in the midst of the pleasures of desire. You should often think on impermanence and strive to utilize the essential in body, life, and wealth." Okay? So this bodhisattva gave who he thought was Indra, the king of gods, some advice about not getting caught up in sense desire because he was surrounded by all these beautiful maidens. Then Mara said to this bodhisattva, "Good sir, except for me, these 12,000 divine maidens and make them your servants. I replied, here I is that bodhisattva, oh, do not offer me these maidens, for I am a religious person and the son of the Sakyas. So these things are not appropriate. It's not proper for me to have these maidens. Okay, so he's being a good monk. And he's saying, don't offer me all these beautiful women. No sooner had I said these words than the Lachavi Vimalakirti came there and said to me, noble son, do not think that this is Indra. This is not Indra, but the evil Mara who has come to ridicule you. So here was this bodhisattva who was deceived. He thought Mara was Indra. And this lay person who comes and says, sorry, Bodhisattva Jagatandara, you got it all wrong. This is Mara. Okay. Then Mara was terrified and distressed, thinking that the Lachavi Vimalakirti had come to expose him. He tried to make himself invisible, but try as he might with all his magical powers, he could not vanish from sight. Okay, so there's Mara. He's scared of Vimalakirti. He wants to get out of there ASAP, and he can't. Okay. Then a voice resounded in the sky saying, Mara, evil one, give these heavenly maidens to the good man Vimalakirti, and only then will you be able to return to your own abode. Then Mara was even more frightened, because he really didn't want to give up these maidens. And much against his will, he gave the heavenly maidens to Vimalakirti. Okay. Then Vimalakirti, having received these goddesses, said to them, now that you have been given to me by Mara, you should all conceive you should all generate the bodhicitta. So here are these maidens that Mara has sent to deceive and seduce, and they've been given to Vimalakirti. And what does Vimalakirti do? He doesn't say, oh, come here, sweetheart. He says, all of you should generate the aspiration for full awakening. Yeah, you should try and become fully awakened Buddhas. So here's Vimalakirti, teaching these goddesses the Dharma and inspiring them to become bodhisattvas themselves. Vimalakirti then exhorted the goddesses with discourse suitable for their development towards awakening, and soon they generated the bodhicitta. He then said to them, you have just generated bodhicitta, and from now on you should devote yourself. He says, from now on you should devote yourself to find joy in pleasures of the Dharma, and should take no pleasure in desire. So he's telling the maidens, yeah, your joy, your delight should come from the Dharma. It shouldn't come from being beautiful women and frolicking with men and so on. And then the goddesses asked Vimalakirti, what is joy in the pleasures of the Dharma? It's a good question, isn't it? Yeah? What does it mean to take joy in the pleasure of the Dharma? And Vimalakirti said, it is the joy of unbreakable faith in the Buddha. Yeah, when you have strong faith in the Buddha, yeah, the direction of your life is very clear. That's joyful. Yeah. It is wishing to hear the Dharma, of serving the Sangha, honoring the spiritual benefactors without pride. It is the joy of renunciation of the whole world, of not being fixed in grasping onto objects, of considering the 5 aggregates of our body and mind to be like murderers because they kill our chance for awakening. It's the joy in the Dharma is the delight in considering the elements, earth, water, fire, air, to be like venomous serpents. Why? Because when the elements in our body are out of balance, we got sick. It's considering our sense faculties to be like an empty town. Yeah? So our eye, ear, nose, tongue, body, these sense faculties to be like an empty town, not perceiving any objects. In other words, the joy in the Dharma is not being hooked by external objects. Yeah. We get hooked by external objects, don't we? We see something attractive and it's like, oh, okay, where is it? I want it. I'll do anything to get it. Yeah. We see something unpleasant and we go, yeah. We don't have much equilibrium, do we? We're constantly reacting to sense objects, to people in the environment. I like, I don't like, I want, I don't want. Yeah. So Vimalakirti is saying, getting rid of all of that is the joy in the Dharma. Yeah. Finding peace inside your own heart. Okay. So it is the joy of always guarding the bodhicitta, always holding that aspiration to be of the greatest benefit to sentient beings. It's the joy of helping living beings, of sharing through generosity, of not slackening in ethical conduct, of control and tolerance and fortitude, of thorough cultivation of virtue by effort, of total absorption in meditation, of absence of afflictions in wisdom. Okay, so he just went through the 6 perfections, saying, you want to know what joy of the Dharma is? It's practicing these 6 perfections, transforming your mind, eliminating stinginess so you can be generous, eliminating the mind that wants to harm others so that we can have ethical conduct, eliminating anger so that we can have fortitude, eliminating laziness so that we can have joyous effort in our practice, eliminating the 5 hindrances so that we can have concentration, eliminating ignorance so that we can have wisdom. So he's saying, this is the real joy in the Dharma. So this is really something for us to think about, yeah? Because we usually think pleasure comes from outside. Yeah, I want this and all these things that are going to give me pleasure. And yet, those things, eventually we separate from them. They leave us feeling disappointed. Yeah. Whereas if we spend our time working inside, transforming our mind, then no matter who we're with, where we're at, what's going on around us, we can be happy. We can be peaceful. Yeah? And it's really possible. I've read accounts of people in really difficult situations. Yeah? Like during the Cultural Revolution in China, when people were imprisoned. Yeah? And same in Tibet, when monastics were imprisoned. And I've heard accounts of how while they were imprisoned and sometimes even being tortured, they turned their mind to the Dharma, and they were able to endure circumstances that would make people who don't have refuge in the Dharma completely fall apart. Yeah? So if you want protection from difficulties, the best way is to transform our own mind. Because then, even if there's external difficulties, our mind is peaceful. But if we don't transform our mind, then even if we're in a beautiful environment, our mind will find something to complain about. Is that true or not true? Do you like to complain? Yeah. We can find lots of things to complain about. But complaining makes us miserable. So Vimalakirti's advice is very smart. So then after that, Mara said to these goddesses, now come along and let us return home. Kind of like, enough with Vimalakirti, let's get out of here. And the goddesses said, but you gave us to this householder. So now we should enjoy the delights of the Dharma and should no longer enjoy the pleasures of desire. So the goddesses are smarter than Mara now. And they're saying, we don't want to go home with you. Okay. Then Mara said to Vimalakirti, if it is so that the Bodhisattva, the spiritual hero, has no mental attachment and gives away all his possessions, then, householder, please give me these goddesses. So, Vimalakirti, I gave you these goddesses. They don't want to come home with me anymore. But you're supposed to be spiritually realized and generous, so you give them back to me, okay? And Vimalakirti says, okay, I give them back to you. So Mara, go home with your retinue, and may you fulfill the religious aspirations of all living beings. So of course Mara doesn't like that last bit of advice, but the goddesses do, and they're going to follow it. But the goddesses, before they leave, they salute Vimalakirti, and they say to him, householder, how should we live in the abode of the Maras? You're sending us back to live with Mara. We don't want to go there. But how should we live once we get back there? So Vimalakirti replied, sisters, there is a door of the Dharma called the inexhaustible lamp. Practice it. What is it? Sisters, a single lamp may light hundreds of thousands of lamps without itself being diminished. Likewise, sisters, a single bodhisattva may establish many hundreds of thousands of living beings in full awakening without her mindfulness being diminished. In fact, not only does it not diminish, it grows stronger. Likewise, the more you teach and demonstrate virtuous qualities to others, the more you grow with respect to these virtuous qualities. This is the door of the Dharma called inexhaustible lamp. When you are living in the realm of Mara, inspire innumerable gods and goddesses with the bodhicitta, this aspiration for full awakening. In such a way, you will repay the kindness of the Tathagata, and you will become benefactors of all living beings. Okay, so the bodhisattvas, the goddesses are going where they don't want to go, to Mara's realm. And Vimalakirti says, you teach everybody in Mara's realm the Dharma. You teach them love and compassion and joy and equanimity. You teach them to cherish other living beings. You teach them to aspire for full awakening. In other words, you make a revolution happen in Mara's realm. Okay, so I don't think Mara's going to be very happy about this. But then these goddesses bowed at the feet of Vimalakirti and departed in the company of Mara. And so then the Bodhisattva, who's relating this whole story, he says, "Thus, Lord, I saw the supremacy of the magical power, wisdom, and eloquence of Vimalakirti, and therefore I am reluctant to go to that good man to inquire about his illness." So all these bodhisattvas are chicken. Yeah? And so are the Shravakas. Everybody feels like they can't look Vimalakirti in the eye because he's so wise. Okay, so then there's more stories like this where the Buddha asks more bodhisattvas to go, and they all tell some story of how Vimalakirti totally floored them and they feel intimidated. Okay, so that's chapter 4. Yeah. Then chapter 5 in the book. So chapter 5, he finally, the Buddha finally talks some of the his disciples, to go and visit Vimalakirti. And so they follow with Manjushri leading them. They follow along. And then Manjushri, who's the Buddha, the Bodhisattva of wisdom, and Vimalakirti have a discussion about how bodhisattvas should counsel another bodhisattva who is sick. Okay, so this is very good advice. We're hearing from the bodhisattvas about how to think when you're sick. So since all of us are going to get sick at one time or another, this is going to be good advice for us. Manjushri kind of says, Vimalakirti's very highly realized, and I can't really understand a lot of what he's saying, but anyway, I'll go and I'll converse with him. Okay, because remember, the Buddha wanted somebody to go and inquire about Vimalakirti's health because he was sick. So then the bodhisattvas, the great Shravakas, Indra, the Brahmas, the worldly protectors, the gods and the goddesses, they all decided to go along because they thought, a conversation between Manjushri and Vimalakirti, this is going to be good stuff. Okay, so we're going to tag along, sit in the back, hope Vimalakirti doesn't look at us and ask us any questions, but we're going to eavesdrop on their dialogue. Okay, so 8,000 bodhisattvas, 500 Shravakas, a great number of Indras, Brahmas, Dharma protectors, and many hundreds of thousands of gods and goddesses. Okay, so this is a lot of people. They're going to Vimalakirti to see him in his house. You think his house is going to fit all these people? Okay. So they all enter the great city of Vasali. Yeah. And meanwhile, Vimalakirti thinks to himself, Manjushri, the crown prince, is coming here with numerous attendants. Now may this house be transformed into emptiness. Then magically his house became empty. He made his house disappear. Yeah, that's, I guess, the best way to have room for everybody to sit in your house is to make your house disappear. Yeah, then nobody can say there's no room here because there's no house there. Okay, so even the doorkeeper disappeared, except for Vimalakirti's couch, and that he was lying on because he was sick. No bed or couch or seat could be seen anywhere. Yeah. So he's receiving all the guests, and there's just his couch. Okay? So then Vimalakirti sees Manjushri, and he says, "Welcome, you're very welcome. There you are, without any coming. You appear without any seeing. You are heard without any hearing." Okay, so Vimalakirti's teaching from the very beginning, because he's saying, okay, you're seeing without any seeing. So in other words, when our eye sees an object, there's no inherently existent eye, there's no inherently existent object, there's no inherently existent visual consciousness that's seeing. So you're seeing without inherently seeing. Okay? So Manjushri says, good to Vimalakirti, "Good sir, is your condition tolerable? Is it livable? Are your physical elements not disturbed? Is your sickness diminishing? Is it not decreasing?" The Buddha asked about you. Yeah, if you have trouble, if you have discomfort, if you're sick, if you're distressed, okay? And then he says to Manjushri also says to Vimalakirti, "How did you get sick? And how long is your illness going to continue? And how can it be alleviated?" Okay. So I guess they're all standing because there's no place to sit. And Vimalakirti replied, when you're sick and your friend comes and says, "How did you get this cold?" You say, "Oh, this colleague at work gave it to me. The guy sneezed and didn't cover his mouth and coughed and all his germs went everywhere, and that's how I got sick, and it's his fault." That's not what Vimalakirti says. He says, "My sickness comes from ignorance." Okay? When we study the 12 links of dependent origination that describe how we get born in samsara, how we can escape from samsara, ignorance is the first link. Yeah, because through ignorance, we create polluted karma. And the polluted karma ripens in us having a flesh and blood body like this that is very receptive to getting sick. Yeah. So Vimalakirti doesn't blame his colleague at work. He says, "My ignorance caused my sickness. I took this body out of ignorance, so of course I'm going to get sick. My sickness comes from ignorance and the thirst for existence, and it will last as long as do the sicknesses of all living beings." Okay, so he's saying, I'm going to be sick as long as all living beings are sick. Here, sick means living beings are in samsara. They're trapped by their own ignorance and karma in samsara. So as long as living beings are trapped in cyclic existence, that long I will be sick. Mm-hmm. In other words, he's not going to leave cyclic existence and get well and abandon everybody else there. Yeah. Were all living beings to be free from sickness, I also would not be sick. Why? Manjushri, for the Bodhisattva, the world consists only of living beings, and sickness is inherent in living in the world. Were all living beings free of sickness, the Bodhisattva would also be free from sickness. For example, Manjushri, when the only son of a merchant is sick, both his parents become sick on account of the sickness of their child. Okay? And the parents will suffer as long as that only child does not recover from his sickness. Just so Manjushri, the Bodhisattva, loves all living beings as if each were his only child. He becomes sick when they are sick, and is cured when they are cured. You ask me, Manjushri, whence comes my sickness? The sickness of the Bodhisattvas arise from great compassion. Okay? So this is talking about the qualities of these great Bodhisattvas and showing what their compassion is. So the analogy is, if you're a parent, how many of you are parents? Yeah, a number of you are parents. If your child is sick, does it affect you? You bet. You're concerned about your child. You worry about your child. You love your child. You don't want your child to be sick. You would do anything in your power to make the child well. So in your heart, you're sick when your child is sick, because that's how much you care about your child. So in the same way, bodhisattvas look at all of us living beings struggling in cyclic existence. And as long as we are sick with ignorance, anger, and attachment, then the bodhisattvas who care for us, like parents care for their only child, the bodhisattvas too are sick. Okay. It doesn't mean they're physically sick. Yeah. It means that they're not jumping for joy because the beings that they care so much about, all living beings, are suffering in cyclic existence. And so they will not be well, they will not pass into final nirvana until all the sentient beings who they cherish like their own children are also well, are liberated. Okay, so that's an example showing what a bodhisattva's compassion is like, how strong it is. Yeah. Now, sometimes in our life, we feel like nobody loves me. Yeah. You ever feel like that? I'm so lonely. Nobody loves me. Nobody cares about me. I could die in this very moment, get hit by a truck, and nobody in the whole world would care. So that's coming from a depressed mind that is not seeing reality. Okay, it's coming from an unrealistic, distorted mind when we say that. Why? Because if we had a big mind, we would know that all the Buddhas and all the Bodhisattvas care about us. We would also realize that there's a lot of human beings and other living beings who care about us. Very often, people care about us, but we can't see their love. We can't let their love in, and instead we feel all alone. But if we were big-minded and saw how much the bodhisattvas cared, we would never feel that we are unloved or uncared for. So remember this. Okay. Then Manjushri says, householder, why is your house empty? Why have you no servants? And Vimalakirti says, Manjushri, all Buddha fields are also empty. So they're playing on the word empty here. Yeah, because empty conventionally means something's not there, like your wallet is empty, your bank account's empty, your refrigerator's empty. Okay. But empty, as they're talking about here, also means that it's empty of inherent existence. And our problem of being reborn in cyclic existence is because our ignorance thinks that things exist inherently. They think that there is a self or a soul in the body-mind complex. They think that everything has its own essence that makes it what it is. Okay? So there's a play on the word empty here. Yeah. All the Buddha fields are also empty. Yeah. They're not empty like Vimalakirti's house is at that moment. Yeah. Although Vimalakirti's house is also empty of inherent existence. So Manjushri says, well, what makes them empty, all the Buddha fields? What makes them empty? Vimalakirti, they are empty because of emptiness. Manjushri says, what is empty about emptiness? And Vimalakirti says, conceptual fabrications are empty because of emptiness. And Manjushri says, can emptiness be conceptually fabricated? And Manjushri says, even that concept is itself empty, and emptiness cannot construct emptiness. So what's going on here, okay, is they're talking about the two truths, yeah. The two truths, the conventional truth, or sometimes we call it veiled truth, because those things, they're all the things we see in the world around us and the people and ourselves, all those things appear to have their own essence, but they don't. Their reality is veiled. It's concealed, okay? So that's called the conventional or the veiled truth. And emptiness is the ultimate truth, how things actually exist. So this whole dialogue is saying all these conventional things around us that function, that arise and abide and cease, that are produced by causes and conditions, all these things are also conceptually constructed by our mind. Yeah, they don't have their own essence. Okay. What does that mean? Okay. If we take the clock, yeah, actually, it looks like there's a clock here, right? If we took the clock apart and laid out all the parts on the table, which I won't do, yeah, but if we did that, is there a clock in any of the parts? No. The face isn't the clock, the back isn't the clock, the arms aren't the clock, none of these things are the clock. Okay, so it looks like there's a real clock here, but when we investigate to find out what is the clock, we can't find it. in the parts. If we put the parts together, the collection of the parts, that still isn't a clock. To actually have a clock here, our mind needs to look at the collection of the parts and develop a conception that this is an object that can tell time, and then give it the name clock. And so it's only due to the conceptual power of our mind looking at this collection of parts, that seeing that it has a certain function and giving it a name, it's only that way that the clock comes into being. Okay? So the clock appears, but there's really no findable clock here anywhere. Okay? In the same way, we say me, right? Do you feel like you're sitting here? Like there's a real person sitting here on the chair? Huh? Yeah? Are you sitting here on the chair? Is there a sense of me? I'm sitting here on the chair. Okay. Now, who are you? Who's sitting on that chair? Okay. We're made of 5 aggregates, okay? Our body, and then we have 4 mental aggregates. Feelings of happiness, pleasure, pain, and neutral. We have discriminations that can identify what different objects are. We have another aggregate or heap called miscellaneous factors, and that's where you put all your emotions and thoughts and different things. And then we have primary consciousnesses, eye, ear, nose, tongue, the mental consciousness. So within those 5 aggregates, is there a person? If I say to you, who are you really? Can you pinpoint something and tell me this is me? Is there something you can draw a circle around and say, this is who I am? This is myself. Is there? You might say, well, on my body. Really? Are you your body? When there's a corpse there, is a person there? Mm-mm. We aren't our body. Are you your consciousness? If you're your consciousness, which consciousness are you? The one that sees, the one that hears, the one that thinks? Which thought are you? Which mood are you? When we really analyze, we can't pick out anything that we can say, that is really who I am. That is my essence, my soul. The real, true person. Can't find it anywhere. And yet, we can't say that there's no person either, because we're all sitting here. So, what we're getting at is we are empty of inherent existence, but when you put all these parts together, the body, the mind, these 5 aggregates together, and the conceptual mind says, oh, there's a person there, and gives it the name person, then we say I. But without this process of conceiving and designating, we can't really say that there's a person there. Mm-hmm. Okay, so that's what this discussion is about. So then Manjushri says, householder, what kind of sickness do you have? And Manjushri says, it is immaterial and invisible. And that's how Vimalakirti responds. Then Manjushri says, is it physical or mental? And Vimalakirti says, it's not physical, since the body is insubstantial in itself. It is not mental, since the nature of the mind is like an illusion. Okay. Manjushri says, householder, which of the four elements, earth, water, fire, air, is disturbed? And Vimalakirti says, I am sick only because the elements of living beings are disturbed by sicknesses. So he's talking about his compassion. And then Manjushri says, householder, how should a bodhisattva console another bodhisattva who is sick? So Manjushri wants to console Vimalakirti, but he doesn't know what to say. So he's asking Vimalakirti, how do I console you? So Vimalakirti says, so the question is, how should a bodhisattva console another bodhisattva who's sick? Vimalakirti says, he should tell him that the body is impermanent, but should not exhort him to renunciation or disgust. Okay, so the body is impermanent, there's nothing to hang on there. But don't have disgust for the body, because if you're a bodhisattva, you want to manifest in samsara to be of benefit to all sentient beings. So you need to have a body for that. Vimalakirti then says, he should tell him that the body is miserable, it is dukkha, but should not encourage him to find solace in liberation. So tell him, yes, the reality of the body is it is by nature dukkha. There is nothing here worth to cling on to for this kind of body. But don't encourage that bodhisattva to just seek their own liberation and forget about other sentient beings. Okay. Tell him that the body is selfless, but that living beings should be developed. So there's no self in any living being, but you should guide living beings. Okay. Tell him that the body is peaceful, but not to seek any ultimate calm. He should urge him to confess his evil deeds, but not for the sake of absolution. Yeah, so when we're sick, we should confess our negativities. But we don't do so with the thought that some external power, like some creator, God, or external power, is going to absolve us of our karma. Okay, because that's not how we purify karma. There's no external power that absolves us of our karma. Yeah, it's by us creating the causes that are counter to these negative, the seeds of negative karma, that they get eradicated. He should encourage his empathy for all living beings on account of his own sickness. So when we're sick, we should remember to have empathy for all other living beings who are suffering from illness. This is very good advice, because when we get sick, how do we usually think? I'm sick, I'm suffering, please bring me this, bring me that. Nobody else has ever been sicker than me. Oh, this is terrible, feel sorry for me. Okay? And Vimalakirti's not falling for any of that. He's saying, when you're really sick, instead of just getting so self-involved and spinning around yourself and making yourself more unhappy, think about the situation of other living beings and develop empathy for them. Think of other living beings who are suffering from sickness that is worse than yours. Think of the people in Syria who are trying to live, but there's bombs falling on their cities. Think of the people in Somalia where the crops are failing and there's not enough food. So when you're sick, don't just think about yourself and feel sorry for yourself. Open your heart with compassion to the situation of other living beings. Okay? So Vimalakirti continues. So remind that bodhisattva, of his own suffering experience from beginningless time. And remind him, too, of his motivation to work for the welfare of living beings. Okay? He should encourage him not to be distressed, but to manifest the roots of virtue. To maintain the primal purity and the lack of craving, and thus to always strive to become the king of healers who can cure all sickness. Thus should a bodhisattva console a sick bodhisattva in such a way as to make him happy. Okay? So tell that bodhisattva, you've been suffering in samsara. Aspire for awakening, but aspire for the awakening of all living beings. Strive to become the king of healers, not just somebody who's a doctor who can heal physical illnesses, but if the root of all of our illness is ignorance, become a fully awakened Tathagata who can teach sentient beings how to overcome their ignorance. Because if they overcome their ignorance, then they're never going to get sick ever again, because they're not going to have this kind of body that is susceptible to illness. Okay. Then Manjushri says, "Noble sir, how should a sick bodhisattva control his mind?" Because when you're sick, your mind gets out of control very easily, doesn't it? So Vimalakirti replies, "Manjushri, a sick bodhisattva should control his own mind with the following consideration." Okay, so he should remember sickness arises from total involvement in the process of ignorance from beginningless time. It arises from the afflictions that result from unreal mental fabrications. In other words, from all of our unrealistic thoughts that exaggerate the good qualities of someone or something and exaggerate the bad qualities of someone or something. Okay. And remember that ultimately nothing is perceived which can be said to be sick. Why? The body is the issue of the four main elements, and in these elements there is no owner and no agent. In this body, there is no solid self. There is no inherently existent self, which means there's no findable person that is sick. Okay? There is no self in this body, and except for arbitrary insistence on self, ultimately no I, which can be said to be sick, can be apprehended. Therefore, thinking I should not adhere to any self, and I should rest in the knowledge of the root of illness. Okay? So realize that there's nobody really there who's sick. There's no self to be found in that body, and the body itself is not the self. So that bodhisattva should abandon the conception of himself as a personality and produce the conception of himself as a thing, thinking this body is an aggregate of many things. When it is born, only things are born. When it ceases, only things cease. These things have no awareness or feeling of each other. When they are born, they do not think, I am born. When they cease, they do not think, I cease. Okay? So most of us, when we're sick, we grasp onto this body. I feel terrible. My body's so sick. We think there's a real me that's sick. We think there's a real body who's sick. And Vimalakirti is saying, actually, the body is just a pile of other things made from earth, water, fire, air. Yeah? The body is just a collection of arms and legs and liver and intestines and esophagus and, hair and skin and eyes and, So when the body is born, it's actually only these different things that are not the body that is born. And when the body dies, when it ceases, it's only all these parts, all these other things that are not the body that die. Yeah? And these things that form the body have no awareness. None of them are thinking, I am born, I die, I am sick. Yeah, that's coming from our mind. Coming from the mind. So he's basically getting at the point of don't be so attached to this body. This body is just a bunch of vegetable goo. Yeah, it's not who you are. It's not something, that is fantastic, that is worthy of being clung to with attachment. Yeah. So just don't freak out when it gets sick. Just relax. You'll be much happier if you relax when you're sick. Okay. So even though we say on one hand that this body is just a bunch of vegetable goo and there's nothing here to be attached to, still we say from another perspective that we have a precious human life because we have this human body. And that precious human life gives us the ability to learn the Dharma, to think about the Dharma, to meditate on the Dharma. And so in that way, having a human body is something very precious. We should keep it healthy. We should, use it properly. Okay. So in Buddhism, we have two different perspectives on our body depending upon the context. From the context of having a precious human life and the ability to practice the body, this body is precious. We should keep it clean and healthy and protect it. From the viewpoint of this body just being vegetable goo that we took under the influence of ignorance, from that perspective, there's nothing worthwhile being attached to this body. So both of those things hold true. Yeah. Okay, so now we're at chapter 6. So then, Venerable Shariputra has this thought. There is not even a single chair in this house. Where are these disciples and bodhisattvas going to sit? Okay. So Vimalakirti read the thought of the Venerable Shariputra and said, Reverend Shariputra, did you come here for the sake of the Dharma, or did you come here for the sake of a chair? So you can see there's some humor here. Okay? Yeah. So, Shariputra is the Buddha's disciple who is the foremost in wisdom. And Vimalakirti is kind of saying, Shariputra, why'd you come here? You're thinking about chairs, not the Dharma. What's the story here? So Shariputra replied, I came for the sake of the Dharma, not for the sake of a chair. And Vimalakirti continued, Reverend Shariputra, he who is interested in the Dharma is not interested even in his own body, much less in a chair. Okay? So, this is also, I think, a lesson for us, because we consider ourselves Dharma practitioners, right? Yeah, I'm a precious human rebirth. I'm a Dharma practitioner. I know things that most of the other people in this planet don't know about. They don't think about samsara, nirvana, virtue, non-virtue. Yeah. So I'm a little bit better than those people because I'm a Dharma practitioner and I think about them. Yeah. Do you get a little bit stuck up sometimes being a Dharma practitioner? I'm not like those old slobs, who kill the termites in their house. I don't do that. But you do go out for live seafood dinners. Okay? So this is, this little part of the dialogue here with Manjushri and Vimalakirti with Shariputra and Vimalakirti. It's a reminder to us, we should not be arrogant because of being Dharma practitioners. Okay? In fact, we should be the most humble of people, and we should, as much as possible, see other living beings as our teachers. Yeah. Because we can learn something from other living beings. But we have to figure out how to learn something wisely from them. So when you see somebody at a restaurant who's getting angry because the cook didn't make the food the way they want, and they're creating a big scene. Send this food back, it isn't cooked properly. We shouldn't think, oh, those people are my teacher. They're teaching me how to get angry and tell the cook off when the cook does something wrong. And no, that's not what, seeing sentient beings as our teachers is about. Yeah. what it is, oh, when I get angry and I make a scene, I look like that, how that person is acting. You know, how do people in the restaurant look to you when they're saying, oh, this food isn't cooked right, send it back, tell the cook to do it better? When you look at that person, what do you think? What do you think? That person needs to chill out a little bit. He's creating a scene. He doesn't need to be so angry because the food isn't just what he wants. You know, he could eat it anyway, or if he really doesn't want to, he could politely ask that they bring something else. He doesn't need to make a scene. Okay? And so then we think, but when I get angry, I look like that person. And other people are looking at me saying, oh, why is she creating a scene? She doesn't need to be so angry and act like that and embarrass everybody. Okay, so when you see other people acting in unbecoming ways, think that they're your teacher showing you how you look when you act that way. Okay? If we think that way, then we'll think twice before getting angry and creating a scene. Okay? Then there's a kind of funny question that Vimalakirti asked to Manjushri, and he says, Manjushri, you have already been in innumerable hundreds and thousands of Buddha fields throughout the universe of the 10 directions. In which Buddha field did you see the best lion thrones with the finest qualities? You know, here's Vimalakirti, who's normally teaching emptiness and kind of made fun of Shariputra, now asking Manjushri, where did you see the best lion thrones in all the different Pure Lands you've been to? Yeah, kind of like they're going shopping, you know? There's a sale, oh, yeah, except, we would say, where did you see the nicest couch? Well, where did you see the nicest lion throne? Yeah. So Manjushri replied, if one crosses the Buddha fields to the east, which are more numerous than the grains of sand of 32 Ganges rivers, and then he describes one Pure Land there, and the Buddha that's dwelling there, and, and he says, the finest and most superb thrones exist in that universe with that particular Tathagata. Okay. And at that moment, Vimalakirti, who went into single-pointed concentration, performed the miraculous feat such that that particular Tathagata and his Pure Land appeared, in front of everybody who's at his house, which is invisible. Okay, with all of their thrones. And those thrones were so tall, spacious, and beautiful that the bodhisattvas, the great disciples, the Brahmas and Indras and worldly protectors had never seen anything like it. And the thrones descended from the sky and came to rest in the house of Vimalakirti. And the 3,200,000 thrones arranged themselves without crowding, and the house and without the house seeming to enlarge itself. The great city of Vasali did not become obscured, neither did the whole earth, nor the world of the 4 continents. So Vimalakirti made these 3,200,000 huge, beautiful, exquisite thrones appear, right there in Vimalakirti's invisible house without anything getting bigger or anything getting smaller, okay? Then Vimalakirti said to Manjushri, Manjushri, let the bodhisattvas be seated on these thrones, having transformed their bodies to a suitable size. Okay? Then those bodhisattvas who had attained the super knowledges, one of the super knowledges is supernormal power, where you can make your body appear and disappear, make it bigger, make it smaller, make it pass through solid substance or walk on water, things like that. So those bodhisattvas who had attained the super knowledges transformed their bodies to a height of 4,200,000 leagues, that's pretty big, and sat upon the thrones. But the beginning bodhisattvas were not able to transform themselves to sit upon the thrones. Oh, those poor beginning bodhisattvas. Okay, so then Vimalakirti taught those beginning bodhisattvas a teaching that enabled them to attain the 5 super knowledges, and having attained them, they transformed their body to a length of 4,200,000 leagues and sat upon the thrones. But still, the great disciples were not able to seat themselves upon the thrones. Okay, so then Vimalakirti said to Venerable Shariputra, who asked about where everybody should sit, Shariputra, take your seat upon a throne. And Shariputra said, good sir, the thrones are too big and too high. I cannot sit upon them. And Vimalakirti said, Reverend Shariputra, bow down to the Buddha of this Pure Land who has come here, and you will be able to take your seat. And then Shariputra, all the other Shravakas, bowed down to that Buddha, and they were able to sit on their own thrones. Okay. And then Shariputra is he says, it is astonishing that all these thousands of thrones, so big and high, should fit into such a small house. And that the great city of Vasali, the villages, cities, kingdoms, and everything else in the world, that all these should appear without any obstacle, just as they were before, even though you have these 3,200,000 enormous thrones now crowded in there. But they don't look crowded. Okay. And Vimalakirti says, Venerable Shariputra, for the Tathagatas and the Bodhisattvas, there is a liberation called the Inconceivable. The Bodhisattva who lives in the inconceivable liberation can put the king of mountains, Mount Sumeru, which is so high, so great, so noble, and so vast, into a mustard seed. Okay? Like put Mount Everest into a mustard seed. He can perform this feat without enlarging the mustard seed and without shrinking Mount Sumeru. And everybody was astonished.
Hello, good evening, Venerable. Just now when you asked the question about where is I, and then the 5 aggregates, so the sense is that there is this background awareness, if I'm not using, for lack of a better word, the awareness is aware of the body, is aware of the sensations, is aware of the thoughts, perceptions, mental formation, and consciousness. So isn't this awareness I? And if not, what is this awareness? That's a question. Thank you very much.
Okay, so is that awareness of, basically you're saying, is the mental consciousness I. Right? Because it's the mental consciousness that perceives the body and the feelings and so on and so forth. Okay, if the mental consciousness were the I, then I and mental consciousness would be completely one and the same thing. So you would not even need two words because they would be the same thing. So then, when you said, I'm walking, you should be able to say, mental consciousness is walking. Is your mental consciousness walking? Does it walk? No. Okay. So the mental consciousness can't be the person. Yeah? The person is designated in dependence upon the mental consciousness, but the two are not the same thing.